I would like to talk to you a little bit about your quiz because I know that the study guide that you received is significantly different than any of the study guides you've received before. So I want you to have an understanding of what it's going to be. The 10 reasons will be split up into 5 and 5. Okay, so and there will be 10 Bible passages. There'll be 5 for these 5 and 5 for these 5. And you get to use your Bible. You don't have to have them memorized. And so you'll read the passage and you'll, bless you. So you'll read the passage and you'll determine from those 5 which reason is being displayed. So the two we're going to talk about today is explain how describing miracles like other historical events implies what the writers wrote is probably true. So when you read a passage from the Bible that does that, then it's a matching sort of thing. You'll match up the reason with the Bible verse. Now, you don't have to memorize these 10 reasons. They're actually on the quiz. They're listed on the quiz. There's 5 of them, and then the other 5 of them. But you are going to choose 5 of them to explain how is it that shows that what the writers of the New Testament wrote is probably true. Explain to me why and how that's a reason for believing in the New Testament. Does that make sense? So you can choose any 5 you want, and they're listed there for you. So again, you don't have to memorize them, but you have to give me a good explanation. If you're going to give me a sentence, or if your words, you're just going to give me a question, why would they do that? That's not good. That's not good at all. Right? So you need to explain. This is why that's a reason to believe. Does any of that make sense? I mean, it's a 30-point quiz. It's fairly short. It's just those 2 things. You're going to match up a Bible passage to each reason, and then you're going to write about 5 of the 10 reasons. Yes.
So you'll match the.
No, the matching thing is separate.
Okay.
And then I ask you to choose 5. You don't have to do all 3. Choose 5 of them and explain those 5. And it's the 5 of your choice. Like, you don't have to explain any one of them. So, questions? Good on that? That's tomorrow, right? Okay. So let's finish discussing chapter 11 then. Explain how describing miracles like other historical events implies what the writers wrote is probably true. Yeah, so in legends, what are those kinds of acts? How are they described? Yeah, there's lots of embellishments. So when in legend it contains this outlandish, over-the-top language. Did you read from, I think it's the Gospel of Thomas about the resurrection? Is this when you do that in the book?
Oh yeah.
The Gospel, where there's this talking cross that goes all the way to the sky, and those are the kinds of miracles that legends give. Things that actually can't happen, like a candlestick that talks and is French and likes the bird, right? That would be Beauty and the Beast. This is written just the way historical facts are written, right? The Bible gives almost a matter of fact sort of description of these miracles. So historical accounts.
Like a fan.
It sounds like a cruise ship that's like a mile away or something. Okay, anyway. So that's how historical accounts are written. They wrote them as if they were historical fact, right? Because they were historical fact. That's not how legends, that's not how fairy tales are written. Question 10. Explain how abandoning their long-held sacred beliefs and dying for their newfound faith implies that they were writers, what the writers wrote is probably true. So what were the beliefs of the first apostles or the disciples? What were they, religiously speaking? Okay, but what was their faith? What was their religion? They were all Jewish, right? They were all Jewish. The Jewish people are God's people. You keep the law. That's how you are Jewish, so you are saved because you're Jewish. And because you're Jewish, you keep the law. It's what they grew up with. It's what they knew. They had the Old Testament memorized. And they were all in for Judaism until a certain Sunday. What? Why? What would cause them to do a complete about face? Like immediately, right? Immediately. What were they doing on that Saturday and Sunday before the women came and told them that the body wasn't there? Yeah. They were hiding. They were cowering. And these same men stood up before kings and princes and Jewish leaders and proclaimed Christ as risen, as Lord, till the day they died, till the day they were martyred, because all of them were except John. And John was definitely went through persecution. So they abandoned these beliefs they had held from birth overnight. Something dramatic must have happened to cause them. I don't know if you've ever known someone who has done just like a complete about face, like immediately, like there was no going into it. You know what? Hey, Josh, don't watch this if you're watching. I've talked about how Josh was far from God for 4 years. But you know what? That started happening in high school. We just weren't aware of it. Like it was shocking to us my first real clue was when I asked him, Josh, do you want to grow in your faith? And he said, I don't know. And to me, that was like a slap in the face. That was like an aha moment in the worst possible sense. But the truth was that it had been happening. He'd just been hiding it from us and going to church and doing all the youth group things and acting like he believed it when he didn't. But if it really is something where someone is like, one day they're this and then and something dramatic has to have happened to cause that change. And then, as we already mentioned, they were cowering men. What caused them to go from cowering in a room with the doors locked to spilling out into the streets and boldly proclaiming? Read Acts 2, boldly proclaiming the gospel. Something has to account for that, doesn't it? And then I think probably the best answer to this is that nobody dies for a lie they know is a lie. People die for lies. They will die for a lie that they think is true. But nobody dies for a lie that they know is a lie. They just say, "Yeah, I'm making it up. Don't martyr me. I'm making it up." And it isn't just that some people were martyred. All of the disciples except John and Paul and others proclaim Christ to their martyrdom. Nobody said we made it up. Nobody saved their own skin. We'll talk about the resurrection, and we'll talk about comparing it to Watergate. But when you have a scandal, when you have a falsehood that is being proposed, let's just put it this way. Somebody gives up. Like, let's say you guys decided to do a senior prank next year, but it wasn't really a senior prank. It was a really bad, like it was illegal, or it was at the time the kids put like animals in the school. But you did something. There's one year actually that our seniors broke that. Don't do that for your senior prank because you get in trouble for that. Cops get called, and it's not good. And all of you go, okay, we're gonna, this is our story. We're gonna stick with our story. Somebody, as soon as Mr. Hood starts talking about out of school suspension and this is going on your record and this is, some of you, a lot of you are gonna go, oh no, you're gonna tell the truth, right? You're not going to stick with that lie. And your lives aren't on the line. You're just getting, threatened with out of school suspension. Why would they do that? Why would they stick with a lie? They died for that lie, if it's a lie. And they were in a position to know if it was true or not. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Okay, so that's 10. We're going to discuss one more question on page 80. And it says this. In preparation for these discussions with non-Christians, that's what we're trying to help you do, know how to defend your faith. What would you, and by the way, to do so with gentleness and respect. I'm hopeful that I am teaching you to defend your faith with gentleness and respect, because that's what Paul tells us to do. In preparation for these discussions with non-Christians, what would you say if one of them responds to you by asserting, you really can't believe the New Testament because the writers were a bunch of brainwashed followers of Jesus who thought he was the Messiah, and after he died, they concocted a story that Jesus rose from the dead and declared him the Savior of the world. Now, I'm not expecting a full answer, but what's one thing you would include in maybe between everyone? What's one thing you would? That they were willing to die for it. And they would have known whether it was true or not. And they were willing to die. What else?
Like the
Right. They wrote things that were that characterized them as being dimwits. They wrote embarrassing things about themselves. They didn't put themselves in the best possible light. They put themselves in the worst possible light, because that's. What else? Yeah.
tell them that it was written, will it happen, and then when they say that's not true, then the Bible's true or not, you can give them the reasons for believing why the Bible's supposed to be true.
So what's one of those?
Like David said, like they wrote embarrassing things about themselves, and just go back to the point that they were that one person
Yes, they could say that, but did they act like brainwashed? And again, they were in a position, to brainwash someone, you have to perpetrate a falsehood to that person and make them believe it to be true. They saw there was a problem, or they didn't. But they knew for a fact that it was true or it was false. So that kind of a person can't be brainwashed. Because to be brainwashed means to be made to believe instantly that something that is not true is true. Yep.
You also said 500 other people were witnesses to it. If they were all brainwashed, that would have been just as great as the resurrection itself, to brainwash 500 people.
Right. There were literally hundreds of witnesses of the resurrected Christ. And there's no such thing as a mass hallucination. That couldn't happen. So, and many of them are named. Not all of them are. Many of them are named. And they were still alive at the time of the writing of the New Testament. If it wasn't true, somebody could have combated that. Now, there are a lot more things you can say. In fact, each one of those 10 things is something you could talk about with someone who doesn't believe the New Testament is true. I want to say one more thing, and then I'll give you time to study for your quiz. Up to this point, we are only talking about the New Testament. Is the New Testament reliable? And particularly, are the Gospels reliable? We haven't talked about the Bible yet. We haven't talked about the Old Testament. We will. That's a future chapter. We will talk about how do we know that the Old Testament is true. But for right now, we're just talking about the New Testament, the gospel story, because it's the gospel story that proves the resurrection of Christ. And as I've told you, we're going to talk about the resurrection. I think that's our next chapter. If the resurrection is true, it's all true. If the resurrection is a hoax, it's all false. So that means that each of us has to deal with that, because what you're going to find is that the resurrection is true. And you can't. It's unwise to see that and to know that and not to respond. Okay? So you can spend the rest of the hour studying for the quiz. Here's one thing that you could do to study for it, because I know that it's not like a name the person who did this kind of thing. I would look for each of those 10 things. I would look up some of those Bible passages, because that's where I got the Bible passages. So if you are familiar with those passages, the quiz will be much easier. Come on.